Welcome back to The Explainer. Now joining me is AIM professor and Business World columnist Sunny Coloma, who served as Deputy Executive Secretary and Chief of the Presidential Management Staff during the Cory administration. Welcome to the show, Sunny. Well, let's start by bringing our viewers to where the government was at the time that Cory assumed the presidency. I've heard stories that people had to bring their own staplers to Malacanang and that sort of thing.
That's not quite true. I think we had a very organized job in the office of the president. And considering that we had to manage many crises at the time. No? I remember when I joined the office of the president, we were preparing for the Iraq-Kuwait war. No? And the president immediately organized the effort to manage the country during that period. No? She called for a multi-sectoral conference so that people could plan what to do in terms of assuring continuity of food supplies, communication with overseas Filipino workers in the Middle East, and local governments being ready for any possible fuel shortage.
But this was around 1990, 1991,
This was at the start of 1991. Yeah.
Okay, so but this was already after she had been in office for several years and had gotten a grasp of the job. But from what you know in terms of the start, because at the start, as people have been looking back, they always point out several things, which is that Mrs. Aquino went into the job with no executive experience. She went into the job with a big, rambunctious coalition. So, from what you know, how was this evolution from the time she started to the point where you entered the government and you saw a government that was essentially working smoothly by that time?
Well, it was my impression that they were really able to put the place in order. No? But my own perspective is that she was one who was able to size up a situation quickly and was able to do what was necessary to put it in order and to make things move in the way they should. And she was a take-charge person without being pushy. And it was a very stress-free experience working with her, because she always seemed to be in control of the situation.
Okay, so walk us through what an ordinary day would have been like in her administration. What was the division of labor? Who were the officials that started off the day and ended the day in terms of meeting with her and undergoing the various functions that they had to go through?
Well, I think we had a well-paced way of doing things in the office of the president. For example, her key speaking engagements were vetted by a group that took into account the audience and also the timeliness of the message that she would deliver. Her appointments were also scheduled by a committee, but she was always flexible in being able to do the necessary adjustments. She would attend to her paperwork very quickly. I remember whenever I would submit something for her approval or for her review, it would be back in my desk in less than an hour. She never kept you waiting on what she wanted to do. For the regular events like cabinet meetings, she always was prepared for those meetings with timely briefings by the staff. And she found time also to meet with her political leaders during the week. So on the whole, I think she was really a person who was able to manage the various demands on her office quite well.
Okay, so walk us through her personal characteristics in terms of her work ethic and how she managed in a sense, the coalition that the cabinet always was. So what were the contrasts, let's say, between the two?
Well, okay, the cabinet meetings were formal meetings, where there was an agenda, people knew what was going to be taken up, and at the end of the meeting, the heads of the various executive departments had a good sense of where the government was at that point in time and what the priorities were.
So what was the objective of the cabinet meeting? Was it actually to resolve policy questions or for the cabinet members to receive instructions? Because different presidents have different approaches to the cabinet. Some basically use it to tell the cabinet what to do, and other presidents use it as a way of getting input to formulate
the cabinet meetings were occasions for the heads of the executive department to get to know what was going on in the government and for the president to emphasize certain priorities. I remember at that time, her priority was always, what can we do that would impact on our people? So even while working on longer term programs, the members of the cabinet, the secretaries, were asked to focus on projects that could have immediate impact on our people, especially in the delivery of essential services. And in a month, there will be 2 meetings of this type. The third meeting would be a NEDA, Investment Coordination Committee meeting, at which long-term projects were approved. And the fourth meeting would be a meeting of the regional development councils, where local government and regional problems were tackled.
Now,
so there was an orderly sequence of matters to be taken up at this highest level of government.
How much delegation took place? Was she a president who delegated freely? And how much did she keep close to herself in terms of things requiring her personal decision and her personal instructions?
I would characterize her, Manolo, as a big picture person. She always looked at the overall agenda of governance. She always looked at the priorities of the government. And pretty much she allowed her secretaries, the cabinet secretaries, to do what was needed at their level. She was not a micromanager. I think that's one way of characterizing her style.
But then on the other hand, what were the policy, the quality control, in a sense, methods for her? I mean, how did she know if people were actually doing what they said they'd do, and how would she tell if people were actually following her instructions?
I think she also kept close tabs of what was happening by maintaining links with people, even through informal means of communication. I remember there was a time she was inquiring about a concern expressed by another department, which tended to give her a different impression. She did not let that fester for some time. She immediately called me up, and I was able to clarify to her what was going on. So she was the type of person who would know what was happening and would immediately resolve concerns of various departments and not allow this to be a thorn in the flesh later on.
Now, from an administrative point of view, basically to put her administration in perspective, from an administrative point of view, the personality of a president really defines the tone the administration will take. How would you compare and contrast hers with those of her successors and even her predecessor, President Marcos?
Well, I would say that she was a very easy person to work with in terms of, it was practically a stress-free experience, no? Because she would make you feel at ease when you were with her. She would ask relevant questions and was not one who would put you on edge. No? I also worked with another president. This was President Estrada. Of course, it was a different personality that he brought into it, but it seemed to me that President Aquino was also an effective manager of her day-to-day work, and she had a good sense of discipline. For example, she was also known to be quite punctual. She would never keep people waiting, and
considering the vast powers of the office, would you characterize her? How would you characterize her use of those powers? Was she always trying to expand the opportunities and avenues for exercising that power, or was she interested in establishing parameters for herself and her officials?
I think she was an empowering president in the real sense of the word. In all the major areas of concern of government, like education, employment, even defense and security, transportation and communications, she would focus on the priorities that have been set and encourage a lot of consultation and discussion on how things can be done best. And in that way, it was an inclusive administration that made people feel that they were part of the whole structure of governance.
Okay, and on that note, I'd like to thank you for being with us, Sunny Coloma. I'm Manolo Quezon, and this has been The Explainer.